Strickland. Do I got that right? Strickland, to the table.
How about that? Check, 1, 2, hello. I don't want to shout at you because that's jarring. Hi, everybody.
I'll shout at you.
Oh, can do that. Okay. Since we came out in opposite order, I'm Miss Shannan. Very happy to be here. We rock, paper, scissored in the back who would moderate, and I am going to be the moderator today.
I should say we scissor, rock, papered. I don't know about
Okay.
scissoring backstage being
Okay.
the most
You're already
family-friendly.
starting.
Okay.
You're already starting, aren't you?
You know what? I've known Taylor Cisco for a number of years. And this is the bluest. I don't know what the pandemic did to him.
I'm keeping on theme.
I didn't even know that other than the fact that he has children, I didn't even know that he knew what any of that adulting did. And now we're like, every joke is something that's kind of about that.
I don't know how to do it. I just trying to match the curtains and the drapes. So,
Likely
colored
story.
superheroes.
When did that happen? No, but we are very happy that you guys are joining us for a topic that in a variety of varieties, each of us has spoken on before. So let's start with this. I mean, so much of what we do at all of our cons it's volunteer related, including when you're a panelist on these panels. So that means that they sent us the list and we went, hey, this is something that we'd want to speak on. So Morgan, Taylor, why did you want to speak on this subject?
I literally assumed that you two would be on the panel. And I was like, let me in on that. But also, I feel like it's always such an important topic to talk about, and I always do enjoy talking about it. So I always try to, get at least one diversity panel in, get that off my list for the year, and then enjoy the rest of the geek convention.
Fair enough, fair enough. And Taylor?
I think I like to do, I shouldn't say I like to do, I do like to do, I like to do a lot of the diversity panels and that kind of thing, because I feel like the more that I do them, then the more normalized, not that me personally responsible, that the more they're discussed, the less special it is, if that makes sense. Like, it's no longer like, oh, we have a panel on black superheroes, we have a panel on superheroes who aren't men. It's just like, here's a panel on awesome superheroes, we just happen to be talking about an entire pantheon that are all non-white men.
Right.
And to get to that level of normalization, I feel that, well, we have to start somewhere. So if we have to call it out, well, we call it out. Well, let's just start calling it out to the point that people start realizing, like, oh, you know what? It's all groovy. Let's just keep talking.
Right, and I think that, and for everybody that's home, we apologize that we won't be able to take questions from you, but you are welcome. We'll make sure that we pass all of our socials on after, near the end of the panel, so you can always ping us later. For anybody that's in the audience, if you have anything, we do have a mic right here in the center of the aisle. We'll try and get to your questions or comments as much as we can as well. And I agree with both of you, part of the reason, one, I'm like, okay, of course it's gonna be Morgan and Taylor, I adore you both. But part of the reason why I choose to be on some of these panels is because I think, especially with the way that our world has become so more currently impassioned about BIPOC creators and those things, I want to continue that, but it's also something that I've been speaking on for quite some time, and a lot of my personal career and my platform is in this space. And so part of the reason why I'm on panels like this is because I want people who are looking for ways to educate themselves. Or if they see something in the news and they're like, hey, I want to be an anti-racist, I want this, I want that. I want them to know that there are people like myself and Morgan and Taylor who are willing to have those conversations with you, so that those people do not ambush their other friends of color who do not want to do that conversation and that education. Because I think that we've heard that story a lot, where they're like, they went up and asked their one black friend, their one brown friend, their one native or indigenous friend, and now that person was like, I'm just trying to grocery shop. It's not my job to educate you. And so I applaud everyone who's watching us at home and everybody that's here for being part of this conversation in a space that is designed to have this conversation with people who are willing to start that conversation. So, have things, I think, and we've had this conversation before. How have things changed for you throughout your experiences as geeks of colors and talking about superheroes from when we first started going, hey, this is my fandom, this is my jam. Have you seen a growth and evolution in your experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a huge bookworm, and that's how I kind of started off in the geek spaces, doing a lot of reading. And I get it from my father, so thanks, Dad, for making me who I am today. But he had, it was very much like Lord of the Rings, Star Trek, a lot of, kind of the old school fantasy and sci-fi, which you really didn't see a lot of people of color in. So it always kind of felt like I'm a part of this fandom, but not a part of this fandom because there's no one that looks like me in this fandom. So now, present day, you get a lot more diversity, you get a lot more people who look like me or look like my friends, and it's just so amazing. Like, I work in a library, so I have access to a lot of books. And I'll go down to the children's area and I'll pick up the books with like the Black Princesses or Hair Love was a book, and then it came in Oscar-winning short.
Yes.
And I'll just read those because I didn't have those as a kid. So now I'm just kind of like filling that void of like little Black girls talking about their hair when they're children. And you see that a lot in the geek spaces as well. And now you get to pick like, okay, now I don't just have to read about white male characters. I can read about, a wide variety of different characters, and I can read characters that are specifically more like me and more geared to me as an audience as opposed to, default white cis male.
I agree with you, and I'm trying to remember the name of the series that the Netflix movie that I watched was Monsters Babysitters Club or something like that. And I watched that because I'm like, oh, I wish this was around when I was this age, and to see that and go, oh no, I'm jamming with this character. So, Taylor, as a performer, as a creative, as an author, I feel like part of the story you were saying why you wrote the fiction that you did was to create more of those characters. Is that correct?
Yeah, because my experience was similar, but also slightly different, because it was less based on demographics and more on interest, like pure interest. So coming up, like there's this great book called Black Nerd Blue Box. And coming up, I got really into...
The author might be signing it in the lobby later today.
I got really into Wonder Woman when I was young, and then 5 years later, got really into a character called Spawn, another character called Tank Girl. Wonder Woman is not a man. Spawn, his true identity, or his previous identity, he's a black man, so spoilers for a 40-year-old, almost 40-year-old dude. But the bullies and the people that would kind of push you away or make me feel unwelcome, it was less that like, oh, you're not watching Black content. Like, Black people aren't supposed to be into nerdy things.
Right.
And there's some other layers with that. And like Doctor Who especially was a huge thing where they're like, no, this isn't for you. So the diversity part of it didn't really even kick in until a little bit later. And then I started to notice on my own, like, oh, you know what? I don't know if people hate genre or if it is just kind of like sort of a demographic reaction to being excluded for so long and to such an extent that you just naturally reject it before even giving it a chance. And then, yeah, not seeing those stories or seeing those stories portrayed in such a way that was so incorrect and so inaccurate. Like in the 70s, a lot of the characters that come out of the Silver Age or the end of the Silver Age and Bronze Age of comic books, if they were non-white, you knew it because their name was like, I'm the Bronze Tiger. It's like, what? Why did you call it? You can bend metal with your hands. Why? I'm the black this. I'm like, or every Native First Nations character was something chief or thunder or wolf.
Yeah.
And it got to the point that it was so ridiculous. Like, you know what? I'm not gonna find this, or there's such a small pool to draw from. So yeah, I started creating my own. I was like, I want to see what I imagine when I look around here and there. And then it took that weird path where at first it was like ignored completely, where we were not allowed to be in it. Then we were sort of like tokenized. With like, we got Dana in Blake 7. We've got Uhura on the bridge of the Enterprise. We got the one. What more do you people need?
Right.
Like, you got it. And then move to that sort of like underground punk rock scene where it's like, well, now we have Blade. And everyone of a certain age remembers when Blade came out, it wasn't this badass black superhero movie. It was just a cool movie.
Right.
That just happened to have a very black-centric cast done very authentically. And then we went from like the punk rock or underground punk rock to like the mall pop, that Blink-182 phase, where then it's like, hey, everybody, check it out. The first thing you heard about was like, this is a diverse show. This to the point that then we got that second wave of backlash when the people became, even if they wouldn't like it, they would start trolling on it. Like, oh,
Right.
this movie's gonna suck because it has a girl in it. It's like, did you see it? Well, they're
No.
ruining it.
Yeah. Yeah, you didn't see it. And I agree. And dealing with that backlash, that preemptive backlash, has been interesting, an interesting challenge. Because I think from the perspective of not only someone who's part of the Black community, but also as a woman, I'm not saying you can't keep making your stuff. All I'm saying is that we can make things for me as well. And that seems to be a continual battle that we still are having. But I also do think it's interesting that even when we look at when we're dismantling all of these tropes and trying to create additional properties, a lot of what happened was back, not only was it, okay, what else do you people want? It was more, and I've talked about this before, I call it the Highlander mentality. So what would happen, whatever the prevailing culture was, the prevailing culture would go, no, we're still the only one, we are still in charge of this genre. So any of you people, any of the others, there was only one of us allowed at a time. So if I was gonna be I was the only woman that was supposed to like comic books in my circle. I was supposed to, and then sometimes I kick two people out because they're like, she's Black and a woman, we're done, kind of thing. So that means that nobody else that was even in the same realm, instead of going, we're gonna create more seats at these fandom tables, it's like you took the one, and for a while I feel like that kind of played us against one another. Instead of going, no, we all should be here as well, it's like, no, we only got one, so if I'm going, well, if there's too many of us, are they gonna shut this down? Because they're gonna think we're taking over. It's like, no, maybe we are. What does it matter?
I just want to throw this in there. Like this panel, this dais right here, one of the greatest moments from a different convention, which I won't name because Council Room is the best con. I don't know con. But someone was like, oh, chatting with someone, I was like, oh yeah, I was on this panel, and it was really cool because the entire dais was just people of color and women. And it's like, oh, which one? And that two-word question, I was like, oh shit, we're getting there. Like, we're not there yet, but those are the kind of things where it's like, because it used to be not that long ago, and still at some events and places now, where it's like, oh yeah, I went to the con, I saw like the Black character, or the Black person, or the Black guest, or I saw the Black panel, and you knew who you were talking about because it was like, there's the Highlander. That's
Right.
the one.
Yes.
Highlander.
And now we have, a slightly larger array of these whole things. So I think also, one of the things that we've talked about in general is how content is easier to access. We have access to a wider variety of content. I will say, with a slight hesitation, that more content with a variety of casts are being made, not to the point that I wish that it was still all these stories were being made. But do you think that storytelling from a superhero's perspective has it taken small steps in the right direction, or have we made some bigger leaps?
I think the steps are small because a lot of what we're seeing is a sort of introduction to marginalized characters, but in some connection to a default white cis male superhero.
Fair enough.
For example, female Thor, who has a relation to our standard male Thor. Riri, Ironheart, in connection with Iron Man. So you kind of get, and like the latest controversy, the new Superman being, spoiler alerts, bisexual. And so you kind of get this, they don't want to like create something new. They want to have a sort of backbone, which on one hand I do understand. Like you have the set fandom that's already there. Let's kind of grow off of that. But then it's kind of like, okay, we're going to introduce this new character and we're going to like add this marginalized thing, and then that's going to be it.
Right.
And so you do kind of get like, people making comments about like movie reboots, TV show reboots, where they take, an old premise, Ghostbusters, for example, and then they bring it back and then they kind of change the characters. And then it's like, well, that's fine, but let's create something new. Let's create a new fandom. Let's have them stand on their own 2 feet, because then you inevitably get the backlash like, oh, the original was better, or, oh, they're trying to be quote unquote woke. And I feel like it's a lot better to be able to create something new and be able to create something great from that, instead of kind of having this sort of toxicity that's already like there before we even get the product out.
Agreed. Fair enough.
And I agree. I think the steps that have been taken have moved in the right direction. They've just been very small. And then the examples when they've done really well are done almost too well. Like in filmmaking and television production, there's an adage that like if you noticed sound editing and sound mixing, then they did a bad job. It works best when you have no idea what's happening. So, and I think that's the same thing that's happening with representation in genre media. So like HBO's Watchmen series,
Yes.
which built off of the Watchmen original, told original stories, was still based with this connection to an existing property, but inverted it, and not even so much as revealing spoilers that Hooded Justice was actually like a black man who was fighting against KKK. Even little things like casting John Osterman, Dr. Manhattan, as black, and not even mentioning it. It was never brought, it was just, nope, this is Dr. Manhattan now, but it was so well written, and the performances were so solid, and the story was just so good, it didn't matter.
Right.
But the problem with that is like, one, yes, that's the goal, eventually that we just have that acceptance. But knowing that we're not there yet, when we don't call it out or when it's not blatant, it almost does a disservice because it gets overshadowed by other more prominent examples.
Right. So yes, we'll go to the audience.
Kind of going with what you're saying and just kind of playing the devil's advocate on some things. How do you feel about the idea of them possibly even being considered by some cultural appropriation, and whether it's actually a positive or negative? For example, you've got the idea, like you were saying, with the bisexual Superman and so on. Does it seem to also be a step backwards by not giving something original? For example, Michael B. Jordan, they keep talking about being the next Superman in the Superman movie. He is going to be Kal-El. And even he said, no, absolutely not, at least originally. Seems he's backpedaled a tiny bit now. Maybe he's gotten pressure from somewhere, but he's going, that would not be right. If I'm going to be it, I'm going to be this version of Superman that they've already created, the President Superman. Okay, great. It just wouldn't feel right doing that. Or you taking new Robin. Suddenly you're getting this Robin going, you know what? Let's make him bisexual. Superboy, let's make him bisexual. With throwing all that out there, is that doing a disservice too by not creating a new character? It's just going, well, we're going to do this. Because what if it was the reverse? If you were going to take Spawn, Al Simmons, and suddenly go, well, we're doing a Spawn movie, but Al Simmons is going to be a white man, is there going to be a backlash now about that? Whereas you're going to take Superman and say the same thing. Well, Superman, we're going to make him black. Do you see? So is that fair or not? Does that do a disservice by not creating original characters of any color versus going, well, here's a character, but we're going to change because the PC, or we need to involve everyone now, so let's forcibly change it?
Can I start? I think that there are some legacy characters that are so legacy characters that you should maintain whatever they are. I think that there are a variety of characters that adapt, morph, and change throughout their iteration, even in the comic books or through the storyline. So it is a different version. Like a great example of how you can do that is with a Spider-Man character, because that's a masked character. That's a different character. There's a reason why that would be. So unless you're going to go all the way to something where a Loki and there's variants and there's different worlds, I think it's very difficult with some of our legacy characters, and especially with our fandoms that are so entrenched in canon on certain things. There's some that I just don't think it's worth the fight. I think there's certain characters that we are allowed to go, we are going to put you in a particular box and go, that part of that character's identity is based upon this. Like you can say, does it matter if the character is a color or not a color? That's when I think that you can go ahead and start that battle and go, well, it doesn't matter what color this character is, so we can recast it as whoever we want to cast it, even though we've never done that before. It doesn't mean it's not a possibility. If we adapt Captain America from the time period that he was in as we upgrade, I think that's a character that you can go, well, now this is why Captain America can still be represented, because that is a title, not an individual. Some of the things, in my opinion, where it's clearly about the individual and the time period and the access that they had, it wouldn't make sense to retroactive Captain America to be black if we put him back in World War II, because the access changes and the storyline has to change. But if we move forward into a future where there's a lot more parity and there's a lot more thing, then it doesn't matter what color Superman is, as far as I'm concerned, if we go that way.
And I respectfully, very respectfully disagree. I think that all characters, so on its face, yes, the simple act in a vacuum of changing for change's sake is disrespectful, no matter what direction that change is coming in. But luckily, it's not in a vacuum in context, because yeah, we saw with the end of, mild spoilers, but Falcon and the Winter Soldier, that there was a Captain America-esque character in that same time period. We didn't focus on him in the major motion pictures, but they could have. You can tell those stories.
But that would have been a different story, and that's why I'm okay with that, because that's what I think they did. Hopefully you guys saw Falcon and Winter Soldier. I think they could have gone farther down that rabbit hole of talking about race and how it represents how it affects those characters. And that's one of the things I like best about it, is that Sam Wilson going, no, do I want to deal with this or hear what I'm doing? And knowing that there was a character, but that character is a completely different. He's a super soldier, and he got the serum, but then they crapped on him and threw him in jail. And so that's why I'm going, it's not the same character.
But it's only different.
It's an interesting story.
It's only different because we got the other story first. If the Isaiah Bradley, so I'm assuming that spoilers are pretty safe here, if the Isaiah Bradley story, when we got Captain America, the First Avenger, if that was the story they told, yeah, there'd be some fanboy backlash and ire, but if they had told it as well as they had the Steve Rogers version and just made that the established Cap, it wouldn't be different. It would be different from the previous iterations, but in terms of the MCU version of Captain America, if that was the established, because there's two generations
I like
of people
what
now
ifing this. I
that
do
think
like
Nick
what
Fury's
ifing
black.
this. Because the only reason why I disagree on that one is that the storyline, because of the historical context of what access black men in America had during that time, it could not have been the story that they told. And the story would still, it would be a lot more of the, how am I overcoming? Here's the thing, here's how I'm not accepted, here's this. It's a completely different storyline because we didn't have even the borderline parity and equity that we have in 2022. And we're still like, can you stop shooting my people? And so I just don't think that that's why I'm like, if we put it in the time that it was placed, it still has to be a white character.
And I mean, I would argue it's a more interesting story because black
Oh, it's
men.
interesting.
You know what I'm saying? Black men served in World War II, so we take Isaiah Bradley. He's enlisted because that's his only option as a black man of that time, and then finds out that in that at the time still segregated armed forces, he was not able to advance. And then we get into the Marvel part. He gets recruited by this weird Hydra scientist that has this idea, starts going out on covert missions, or is used in propaganda films to hire more minorities to the war effort. And then he gets frozen in ice in that same period and then wakes up now. I think the stories we get to tell with Winter Soldier on, with an Isaiah Bradley as our primary Cap, are far more compelling than Steve Rogers, because we've gotten the Rip Van Winkle with a lot of characters.
I agree.
Steve's just pretty, nice butt.
Yeah.
But we've seen that.
But I think that is a more compelling storyline as well, but I also think that you're giving a lot of credit to the majority of the fandoms. And so, like now, I think that we, even with a lot of the things, the content we're creating, it does have layers and nuances and all of these things. We want to do that. I do not think that that's what we were creating when those characters were conceptualized.
What you just said right now, that's actually changing the story. Would that diminish the story? No, but that's a completely different story now if you're doing that with Bradley. Whereas the comics, at least with Bradley, they played on the whole idea of how they were vaccinating all peoples of color in the military secretly, and they had no idea. So that does fit historically, but he's a completely different character. You can go with the Captain America there, but could you really keep the original Captain America story by changing race? Even with his Hispanic, well, you know, he wears Puerto Rico out.
Right. That is Puerto Rico.
But even then, you're changing the character then, in a sense, by changing the race. Even if you were to do that, is that really a positive step forward?
I would argue yes, because again, with changing, you're not changing, you're adapting the character. Because if we go back to, you know, we're in the TARDIS, we're going back, and the original Cap is being depicted by a Latino character, or Asian, or black, or whoever, that becomes the dominant Cap. Yes, it is changing, or it's being adapted differently than what people are used to in the comics, or that terrible 70s attempt that they did. But that becomes the dominant Cap, because like I kind of mentioned, like, we have two generations of people out there now, two full generations that for them, the only Nick Fury is bald black Nick Fury.
Yeah.
Like, they missed an entire half century where he was a grizzled old white guy with graying temples. And that's a huge, huge change because Samuel Jackson is probably the blackest black person in the history of black people.
Yeah.
But he's also Nick Fury, and that sort of works. And there's always little manipulations. And I think it will work the other way too. With maybe the only exception would be possibly T'Challa. That would be a little awkward. But well, okay. So
I'm trying to like what if in my brain with a different actor and a different character. And here's the other reason why I think that some of these switches, we go with the easy switches. We take this is a thing that my friend Will Spottermare and I talk about all the time. Like usually the first way that we get a character of color is they take out the redhead, kind of thing. And so they find another smaller group and they go, well, we'll poop on them and put them in it, and everybody should be fine, or they swap something minor that's like that first. And so I think that there does need to be more content that are major swaps. And then when I think that we can do those minor swaps, it's on characters like, if we, even though Fantastic Four, the last movie was garbage, putting Michael B. Jordan, there's no reason that character couldn't be any color. So switch it out if you can. It's whoever's the best actor, very talented actor will put you in there. There's lots of those kind of swaps that I personally prefer first, where it's like, just get it in, make this, because and Taylor, you had brought this up a couple of times ago, where it's having enough characters of a variety of shades, of proclivities, everything, that you can have that character be a minor character, where it doesn't have to be, have enough going on in the series that you can just be the dude and happen to be black. So,
or I mean, if you're gonna make him major, I'm gonna leave T'Challa a little bit.
Because everybody was like, I can't see that one.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I'll say on that, so Charlize Theron, by definition, super tall, really pretty, blonde hair, blue eye. By definition, Charlize Theron is an African American. I'll leave that there. But I was gonna say, for major characters, there's so many fun ways. I still hold to the headcanon and mild internet fan theory that Lex Luthor is a black man. Because one, it validates his distrust of Kal-El. Because here is a super-powered alien from a red state, the reddest state. I wouldn't trust him either.
But if they swap that out, I wouldn't be mad. I
Right.
know a lot
But
of
Lex
people would
Luthor's a
be. I'm like,
major
we could do that.
character.
If we switch out, there's some, okay. He's major, but he's not major based upon a particular prevailing culture definition. And that's when I think that's when we get that. When you swap out, if you swap out, and that's when I started with a Captain America and a Superman kind of thing. And I always think it's interesting whenever they get super super tight on something that's an alien. And I'm like, we can imagine aliens any way we want. Why are you so tight on this and we're not letting this go? But we'll use Superman as an example anyway. The way that they were created was so based upon that particular time period's a white American hero. That those, I think it's a lot more difficult. And for me, who wants to have more of this content created and more things that we can enjoy, I'm willing to go, I don't need your Superman, keep your Superman, make me a thing. And so that's why I just kind of go, yeah, I can see why you'd get upset, because I would probably be one of the people going, can you just leave T'Challa alone? There's not enough of these people anyway. So if they swapped it and whitewashed it, I would be on the internet going, why are you doing this? And so that is where I draw that demarcation.
Yeah, I agree with Miss Shannon. It really depends on the context for me. But if we're talking Superman and Captain America and their original iterations of Kal-El and Steve Rogers, in my mind, the stories that they want to share and the themes that they want to create, it doesn't really work in that context if it's not a white man. And I'm like you, where it's okay, they want to change the race of Kal-El, but then it's that's a different story. And then if they're just gonna put a black person in that role and not acknowledge that it's a different story, then that's just tokenization. And I'm not down with that. But if you get Steve Rogers passing the mantle to God, what's his name? My mind is at Black Cap.
Black Cap works. Sam Wilson.
If he passes it along, then it's like, okay, and now we can create a new story. And then even though it's still like Captain America, now we can get something new instead of just like making Steve Rogers black and then it's like in the 40s and then it's an entirely different story, which that's not bad. I would absolutely enjoy like a different story like that. But if they're trying to stick with the same stories and themes, for certain characters, it will definitely change it if the race changes. In other examples, kind of like Nick Fury, it doesn't really matter because Nick Fury's main MO is like he's a spy. He's like the super spy. And so you get Sam Jackson in there and he's like, yeah, I believe him as a spy. He's he's running the whole operation. You see him as a man in charge. And so it doesn't really matter what race or even what gender that character would be, because they're just supposed to kind of represent this, spy organization, and it just needs to be someone who kind of has like the cojones to like operate shields, which Sam Jackson absolutely has. So in some contexts, it just doesn't work. Other times, it's just like, okay, yeah, let's just bring in the best person who represents this aspect, or let's change it up. We I don't know, we had all these white people in this one comic, so let's change up the characters a little bit and have them in this new organization where it's not just, white dudes.
Right. So as we are...
We're bullying Taylor.
As we are continuing to have this space grow, evolve, and change in certain directions. So let's use our DCs and our Marvels. Because I do think that we've made more ground if we look at some of our independents. That's moving faster. And so hopefully, if you guys, we both have some, all three of us have some things that we love that are probably on the underground, and we can talk about that as we move on as well. But I am happy that we have a little more faith that characters of color and that female-driven properties can do well, and that we're at least going, give it a shot, kind of thing, which for a while they were just like, they don't make any money. What do we do from a perspective of fans who want to continue to change the gaze that our content, especially our superhero content, is being created under? So how do we how do we change the gaze so that this property, although it does have some characters of color in it, how can we have the viewpoint be something that's more accessible when we're looking at our superhero fandom? And I see you in the audience. We'll come to you in just a moment.
I think the biggest part of it is to do it. Like, this sounds really bad, but I fully understand why a lot of major studios don't take as many chances, because from a fiscal standpoint, it makes sense. It's like if you have literally hundreds of millions of dollars and thousands of jobs on the line with every project, you want to play as broad and as safe and as appealing, quote unquote, as possible. And that's understandable. It's not very progressive, it's not woke, but I get that. If Disney's like, no, we're not gonna, or not Disney, but Warner Bros., we're not gonna have, I don't know, it would be Disney, Marvel, whatever. I think Victor Von Doom should be a woman because it makes way more sense with his original story. But I understand why Marvel probably won't cast a woman actor as Victor Von Doom because they have to make back the hundreds of millions. I get that.
Okay.
But I do think that it's twofold. One, creators have to create it and let's just get it out there. And then on the other hand, it's really on us. Because Hollywood is a lot of things. It's racist, it's sexist, it's homophobic, it's transphobic, it's terrible. But above all that, it's greedy. It doesn't care as long as there's money. So if we talk about what we want, and then all these properties and these smaller things come out, and then we don't support them, Hollywood notices that.
Yeah.
When folks say, we want female-driven movies, and then they release them, and then no one goes to see them, even if they're bad. But they say, like, well, the box office says people don't want this. I can't risk another couple of $100 million and all these people's jobs. It's sort of on us.
I see that.
I agree and disagree because there's a lot of really shitty movies and TV shows that go out that's very, white men led, and then they get more opportunities to make these. So yes, I absolutely agree that we need to, speak with our wallets and speak with our time and our views to make sure this happens, but it's not always that simple because it can do very well, and then it's like, oh, well, it's still a risk, so we won't do it. But I feel like we need to take, as a collective fandom, we also need to be taking a look behind the scenes, because it's not only important to have like a strong female character, a strong marginalized character on the big screen. We need to be sure that those people are also behind the scenes, in the director's chair, in the writer's room, in the production line, behind the cameras, in, the hairstylists and makeup artists. We need that diversity in all aspects of this media. And so often you kind of see like, okay, yes, this is the female-led movie, but all the writers are men. And you can tell, you can see it.
Right.
And then so it's kind of like, yes, I want to support that, but also we need to like be taking a look at, who wrote this, who directed this, and also supporting that, so they can get more opportunities to create more, and we grow that as a whole, instead of just like, okay, well, there's 2 big name actresses, let's go see it, but all the director and all the writers are men who don't really know how to write female characters.
No, I fully endorse that 1,000%.
Yeah.
Well, because every year they have like the Oscars So White, which is a good,
Yep.
noble cause, but the Oscars are freaking United Colors of Benetton compared to AMPTP, the
Right.
DGA, the people who actually have the power and money and make the pictures that get the Oscars. There's like one black dude in the AMPTP when I joined. And I was like, oh, cool, now there's 2 of us in a guild that has literally tens of thousands of members
Right.
across the planet. That's weird. Oh, so AMPTP is American, the Association of Motion TV, the Motion Picture and Television Producers, TV. The same thing, WGA, both
Yep.
East and West, is very cis-het white dude.
Right.
Even
And then
though-
when I
yeah.
show up to those things, like it really is like, oh, I'm like, no, I'm here too, kind of thing. Because again, back to the producers thing. And one of the things that we talk about is creating additional space, because we have some friends who are fantastic allies, and they're like, well, I'm going to step down. And I'm like, you can't step down until you have somebody that you are going to have that, because they presume, because they're feeling like some guilt, that they're creating a space. And I'm like, yeah, but if you leave and you are the one that was advocating for these things, who's going to fill that void? So not only do you have to fill that void with the right person, so if you're saying, okay, it should be a woman or a person of color or somebody of the LGBTQIA plus, community, okay, you gave them that one spot. But if they don't have a cohort, you're setting them up for failure. So at least if you were there, like there needs to be an additional table so that anybody that has that now has enough support that they're not just on their own, and then when they, like, that's a lot of pressure to put on one person. So we have those conversations as well. So we'll go ahead and go to the audience. Yes, thank you for waiting.
Sure. I hope you can hear me through the mask.
Yes, thank you, friend.
I'm not quite old enough to know when Superman first came out, but I'm probably closer to that than anybody else in the room. I wanted to talk about Stan Lee and Superman just a little bit. Stan Lee's first big success at Marvel was when he told his boss he wanted to have more diversity, and his boss was really worried about it because of the money, just like you were saying, same issue. And Stan Lee said, I can write something that's very diverse and it's going to be a huge success. And his boss said, well, you go ahead and try it. And he wrote about a platoon, an army unit. I think I owned issue 1 a long time ago, and I don't remember the name of it, but it was something like Sergeant Fury's Roughnecks or something like that. Does better memory? What was it called?
Howling Commandos?
Howling Commandos, yeah. And he had a black guy and a gay guy and a Jewish guy. And it was a big success. And the boss there noticed, and they moved him up into writing more stuff. And the thing I wanted to say about Superman is that when he was created, he wasn't just a white guy. The two, you maybe already talked about this, I hope I'm not going backwards here, but he was created by 2 young Jewish men who were new immigrants and who felt like outsiders, who were very unhappy and lonely living in New York. And they created him to be an out of place, not at home, uncomfortable alien. And I've heard this idea that Clark Kent is actually the person, the essence of Superman, and Superman is just somebody that he becomes, but that he's really Clark Kent. Anyway, at the time that Superman was created, it's good to remember that white supremacists in the United States really hated Jewish people.
Fair enough.
I mean, they were terrible, and it was at the same time that the Nazis were rising in Germany. So it was a scary, creepy, unpleasant time to be in the Jewish minority, and I think that some of that does come out in the character and affects the way that we think about it.
Thank you. Yes,
Thank
if you
you.
want to go ahead and come over to the microphone.
Question. Favorite superhero? Why? What can writers learn from that? The things that they got right or the things they got wrong?
Oh, like favorite superhero of color or just in general?
Okay.
So I'm a big fan of Wonder Woman, and I'll explain why. Back before she was cool. Because like a long time, like yeah, now you walk out. I like Wonder Woman. It's like no shit, everyone does. But so when I first got into Wonder Woman, it was the mid-late '80s. I know I don't look so old, but and it was not. You did not do that. Wonder Woman was the girls' comics. It was the ones that your kid sister got because you got comics, and so your parents would give her a comic to shut her up, or you got them from the dentist office back when that was a thing. You had a little treasure box. But I like Wonder Woman for similar reasons as like Shannan Schuster and Joe Superman's creators, because she was this outsider. At least I joined in the '80s with the George Perez run, which was kind of like one of the first big reboots, where she became this sort of like Amazonian made by Zeus, but not like in the usual way Zeus makes things. And like,
Fair enough.
but she never fit in with the Amazons. But she also, even though she was charged with being the defender of man, never fit in with humanity either, but still cared about both. And that for a native black kid, that resonated super hard. Like kids say now, like, oh, I feel seen or called out. Like, I don't know what the term was back in the late '80s, but I probably screamed at when I first read that, because I was like, oh, that's me. Because yeah, the black kids are like, no, you're way too nerdy for us. Nerdy kids are like, we don't break dance, man. Like, we can't hang out with the brothers. And I was like, what? So, and then here's this super strong, super awesome person in the same situation that did it anyway. Because I was I joke that I could easily been one of like the Columbine bros, which is a tasteless joke. But because I felt very alone, very alienated, very ostracized, that everything was against me, and like easily it could have been an incel or one of these other people that take that negative energy and don't have a positive outlet for it. I'm not going to say that Wonder Woman saved my life because that's way too cliche, and also because I also discovered Doctor Who around the same time and Star Trek. So it's more of a trifecta. The three of them together helped me not become a piece of shit. But I think the reason the writing was so good is because Wonder Woman writers write her very realistically, at least depending on who's writing her. But they also write humanity very realistically. One of the things about Jenkins' take on the character is the beauty of Wonder Woman 2017, again, mild spoiler, is that she discovers it's not Ares, it's not like this evil power that's making mankind terrible. People are just really shitty, but she's gonna help them anyway. And that is so poignant compared to a lot of other comics, especially when it's like the more black hat, white hat, where it's like, oh, here's an evil doer doing evil. I'm gonna stop them because I'm a good person. Wonder Woman's like, I should just let them kill themselves. I can have all the ice cream, just hang out, but I'm not. I'm gonna get in bed. And it's that altruism, even if it's somewhat reluctant, is definitely what draws me and keeps me drawn to Wonder Woman. And they get her right every time.
Moria?
My favorite is our lovely Storm, Aurora Monroe. I just remember seeing the first X-Men movie and just being so blown away that there was a black woman on screen, and a few corny lines aside, she did the damn thing. And so me, who was a real bookworm, and actually was growing up with a lot of like boys around, like I had a lot of cousins who are boys, and our neighborhood kids were mostly boys, and always struggling to kind of keep up with them. And always kind of being like forced, oh, well, this is the girl character, so you have to play the girl character. And it's like, I don't even like this character. This character looks and acts nothing like me, but I guess this is who I am now. But seeing Storm on screen and just seeing how much power she wielded, and then getting into the comics, and that was kind of my first introduction to comics, was going for those X-Men just to see more of her and seeing, she's a queen. She's an Omega level mutant. She can destroy the entire world if she wanted to, which I think is pretty cool.
Right.
So just seeing her and then kind of realizing that's something that I can aspire to. And in the parking lot from the movie to the car, and my mom was sleeping because that's what she does.
Yeah.
But me and my brother, I kept trying to control the weather, and I was trying to roll my eyes back, are my eyes white? Am I controlling?
Yeah.
And it was such a huge turning point for me. And then so kind of going through her different iterations of leading the X-Men or stepping aside for someone else to lead the X-Men, I just feel like she really encompasses a lot of just strength and that I personally experienced with a lot of Black women in my life. So it was always just a very strong connection between us. And then if they give her a bad outfit or they mess up her hair, then I'm like, yo.
They're like, you messed that up so much I had to cut it out. So cut that bad cut out.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, she's my favorite and definitely my introduction to kind of the wider world of geekdom outside of what my dad liked.
When I grew up, I was similar to Taylor, that I was the nerdy one, but I was fortunate enough that I also played sports and did some other things and was slightly, because of where I am on this particular spectrum, kind of just got used to it. I'm like, oh, okay, I don't fit in. I'm not, I'm not white and I'm not Black enough for the Black kids either. And just got really good at, I'm like, I guess I can't care, and I'm just going to be oblivious and do whatever I do and lean into that. But what I always wanted was, I liked the escapism, and I also liked characters that found their superpower. So I was always into, and my favorite character, and one of my favorite characters still now, was Spider-Man. Because I wanted that escapism. I wanted to go, well, I have my normal life, and then something happens, and instead of it being terrible, it's actually something that is to my benefit. Like, if I knew I'd get superpowers by falling into a radioactive lake, I would jump in that lake. And that's what I was like even as a kid. So being able to have a character like Spider-Man, that then it was also allowed me, I could be that one because Spider-Man had a mask and a costume and this, and that was part of it, is that, you lived your life and you did all these things, but then you also got to have this other thing that made you special. And so I liked that because I was really used to, again, imagining myself as what would it be like if you had these superpowers. And most of my other things, I either wanted to be a wizard or I wanted magic badly when I was a child. So if I wasn't a wizard, then I wanted to be in Charlie's Angels. And so I remember projecting myself into whoever the brunette was, because that was the closest that I had. And so I'm like, oh, look, okay, that one. And whoever the smart one is, I'm that one. And which was usually the brunette. And I was like, okay, the smart one is the one that's this. But then there was Spider-Man. And, and it was trying to figure out how to navigate your world, and your parents are on you still, and they don't see why you're cool, and everybody else still thinks that you're a giant dork and you gotta do your work, but you're really good at science. But look at all this other stuff I can do. And I have superpowers. And so that character has always resonated with me. And so watching that character evolve, and that goes slightly back to what we were saying before, I think, whenever that character has evolved, and that now we have Latinx versions, we have, female versions and female presenting versions, we have Black American ones and biracial ones. I think that character makes sense for those changes. And that's one of the things that I think they've done right with that one, is that this character in different scenarios can go and be a different person and protect the city and the community and the town and their family and whatever it is that they're in at that time. And it absolutely makes sense. And they're still Spider-Man. They're still Spider-Person. And so I think that they've done a great job with that, especially once we get into the most current iterations, once we get in the comic books. I think they've done a really good job. I've enjoyed watching that character evolve. Even in this crappy video game that I played, that I'm going to bring up this point because we have about 10 minutes, I'm gonna bring this up. They, I play this game called Marvel Contest of Champions. So it's basically Street Fighter with Marvel comic book characters. I've been playing it for like 5 years. I'm that person. But one of the things they did recently, and they did this last year as well, but they did, the fandom, so all the players get to pick new characters. And so they started these brackets. And what they did with the brackets, and so my friends and I were just like, so now this is shitty. So what they did with the brackets is that they were stacked. So they had a lot of diversity available, kind of. But if you look at the way they did the brackets, like they had one bracket that had Agatha Harkness, and not Agatha Harkness from the comic books, not old Agatha, I don't know if you're familiar. Agatha Harkness that we got in WandaVision is not what you get in the comic books at all. And so they had Agatha Harkness, that's basically the WandaVision version of it, and then they had 3 additional female characters. Okay, that sounds like it should be cool, but this is all in the same bracket, right? Agatha Harkness, who just came off a TV show. They had Armor, who's a Japanese character. She's dope. Look her up. It's cool. They had Danny Moonstar, Native American character. They also had, in the same role, they also had Kushella, who was like a Sorcerer Supreme, like another Native character. So like one's Apache, one's something else. So they put them all in the same bracket. So how is that fair, and how is that creating a level playing field when it wasn't, am I gonna pick one of these characters? It's now I have to choose not only which woman am I going to put, what am I gonna put first? Am I gonna put the fact that I'm like, well, I just saw Agatha, and I like that actor, Christine Hound was dope, but I really want this character. And so that was how I think everything was set up. Like it really came down to, and now we're down to the final ones. And of course, because of the way the brackets are laid out, now it's down to Agatha Harkness and Johnny Storm.
That's not a competition.
It's not, no, and
That's
so I'm just
the
like,
funeral of John Storm.
exactly. And so they've had all these characters of color and all of these interesting characters that were in there, but it was stacked in a way that the prevailing and the main players, of course they're gonna go, well, I've never heard of Danny Moonstar. And so I'm like, she's super amazing, but they don't know that. They're gonna vote for the person that they know and they recognize, and the only character in this bracket that they recognize is Agatha Harkness. And so I think that happens a lot, which leads me to a question. When we are going, all right, back to what we started with, all right, we have more superheroes in the universe. How do we continue to champion, support, and amplify some of these characters so that more people know about them? What do we need in order to get there?
Oh, dang. One of the first steps is we got to get this gatekeeping shit under control. Comics are already kind of inaccessible to a lot of people, especially because it's just very intimidating because there are so many runs. You know, do you start with the very first comic back like 50 years ago? Do you do the new run? People are complaining about the new run and you don't want to be, a part of the problem or whatever. And then you get parts of the fandom, I won't say all because there are some really great people in the fandom, but then you get some people who are just like, oh, well, you're only here because of the movies, we don't want you here. And it's like, well, no, the movies are accessible for a lot of people, and now they're showing an interest, and the fandom's not gonna diminish because it's becoming more mainstream and people are liking it more. So that's kind of one of the first steps is we really just have to start challenging that and breaking down those barriers and being more welcoming and like, hey, this is super intimidating, but here's where I started, and you can try this, this, and this, and then you just kind of go from there. And so really creating a strong support system for the newbies coming in, and also being sure that you're staying connected with, people who have been in the fandoms longer and kind of, keeping them in the loop, like I won't say like shun them, but letting them understand that, this is for everyone now. And I know my dad makes a joke where it's, he'd be like, we got beat up for reading these comics back in the day, and now everybody likes it. And it's like, well, yeah, but we don't have to beat them up for liking it just
Right.
because you got beat up for liking it, you know? So I think that's definitely one of the first steps is the gatekeeping makes things worse for already something that I consider just difficult to get into when you're kind of talking specifically about getting into comic books. And so I think that's just a problem that we really need to work on, and then we can grow from there as a community.
Okay. And Taylor?
I think just piggybacking off of that, I think we, as a geek community, we will spend hours debating, posting, talking about all the things we did not like. And the shows that were terrible, the movies that sucked, they did this wrong, don't read this. And then we'll spend maybe 5-10 minutes with stuff we love. It'll just be like, oh, I love that show. And that's it. And I think that too is kind of that part of that gatekeeping. It makes it so intimidating for anyone who's new to the fandom, or even someone who's like been in the community for a while, may not be familiar with that particular title or that property, to get involved. Because like I like a lot of weird stuff, just personally, and I know it's weird. And like you not liking it is not gonna impact me digging it. But for a lot of other people, if you hear someone ranting and raving about how this sucks and only idiots would watch this, and I can't believe they put this garbage out there, well, you're gonna feel really hesitant to be like, well, actually, I kind of liked it. Because then you're gonna bear the ire of this fanboy temper tantrum. That's why I always say fuck fanboys. It's all about fangirls. We rule. And then like, in addition to not harshing the squee, like sharing the squee. Because like to your dad's point, yeah, we definitely had a lot of that sort of like, man, you kids can go to Target and get like a Guardians of the Galaxy t-shirt. And now I'm like, oh dude, you can go to Target and get a Guardians of the Galaxy t-shirt. Because back in my day, oh, I even have a rocking chair. Back in my day, you had to go to a convention and give the dealer $20 and meet him in the alley for this weird bootleg that he, you know. It's like, oh, this is great that I can go to Target and Hot Topics have stuff besides like weird punk jewelry that makes your skin green. Like, it's fantastic. No offense to Hot Topic fans. But yeah, the sharing and the love and not harshing the squee.
Right. Well, I love it. I love it. And we only have a couple more minutes. Did we get to everybody in the audience that had anything that they wanted to share? Okay, come on over. Thank you for joining us, friend.
Thank you for having this. It's been interesting. My question is sort of, I don't know how best to phrase it, but I'd like to ask it regardless. So when you watch diversified representations of heroes, especially in the category of Black heroes or African American heroes, they tend to feature stories that highlight that diversity. I'm thinking of the Miles Spider-Man story and also the Black Panther story. Those come to mind first, but there's other examples of that. Do you think it's a better, I don't know how best to ask this question, but do you think it's
just ask. We're here.
Okay. Do you think
We
it's better-
support you.
Awesome, thank you. Do you think it's a better highlight of diversification of telling those kinds of stories, or just having diversified heroes who sort of deal with more traditional superhero issues that don't sort of highlight that diversified?
I would like to see series that do both. One of the things I liked about Into the Spider-Verse is I felt like it was just inherently diverse, and they didn't super focus on it. He had this family. His family did what they did. I think once we get, and thank you very much for sharing your question, friend. We appreciate you. I think that we knew enough about T'Challa and Black Panther, if we're looking at the films, that I was comfortable going and seeing what Wakanda looked like. And so I don't feel like that was an overly, an over-representation. One of the things I loved about it as well is that a lot of times what we grew up with is if you had a Black character, everybody was Luke Cage. Everybody was in jail and they came out and they had a redemption story for they did that. You know, everybody was this. And so when even though they did in the comic books, they did Misty Knight dirty, at least she wasn't an ex-con, kind of thing. She was, she had agency, and then she got mind controlled and messed with and all this stuff. But I was looking for characters that were like Misty Knight. And I also was looking for Black American characters because it was always I had to go to Africa. And I'm like, I'm not from Africa. I grew up in South Phoenix. I do like when there is a variety of characters, and I do like when they do somehow managed to show that their experience may be different than their white counterparts. I think that they did a pretty good job of that with Falcon and Winter Soldier. So, and what do all of you think?
I agree, both. I feel like usually, especially when I was younger, it's a bit different now. It's usually when you're younger and you see black characters in movies, it's a quote unquote black movie, and it's like kind of like a weird romance comedy thing, or it's like everyone's gangsters and thugs and you're worried about like drugs in the neighborhood or whatever. So I really like seeing aspects of African American culture specifically where it's not just like focused on those aspects, because there's so much more to the community. And so specifically with like Miles Morales, or even kind of like Luke Cage, I know they touched on aspects of, the standard, like drugs and crime, but you see more of the culture, and you don't get to see that in media, and you need to see it. You need to see African Americans differently from what they've been portrayed in the media in the past. But also, they need to be on some superhero shit, because that's what
Right.
we're here for.
Exactly.
I think the only thing I would add is, like, you said it yourself, is diverse stories. So their stories should be diverse. I mean, one of the things about Luke Cage, the Netflix series, the first season at least, is that it seems like, at first glance, it's just a black stereotype story, but they hit every aspect. They're reading Ellison, and they're playing chess, and they've got musicians and athletes, and it's like, oh, wait a second, this isn't just like black. It's this multifaceted 3,000 Shades of Black. And another character like that would be Spawn Volume 1.
Yes.
At issue number 12. There's no fighting, and it's one of the greatest comic book issues ever written, because it's really getting to why Al Simmons, who is Spawn, why he did make the Faustian bargain in the first place. And it's because he missed his family. He loved his wife and daughter, or eventually he wanted a daughter. He loved her so much that he literally made a deal with the actual devil to come back, which is not a story that is unorthodox. Like, of course black people love each other, just like any other group love each other, but you didn't see that before.
Right.
And you definitely haven't really seen it that often since, where it's like, oh, we have a black superhero, but he's not Chapel, he's not War Machine, he's like a romantic who makes a deal with the actual devil because he's like, I miss my wife so much. And that's like, it's like, oh. And then, of course, he has like the badass living costume and chains and all that other stuff. But yeah.
Well, we are approximately halfway through Console Room 2022. We encourage you, if you're at home, continue to watch. We appreciate you joining us on our Cyberman opportunity. If you're here with us, I know each of us still have some additional panels that we're on, so we'll go ahead and start with Morgan. Where else can we find you?
I am part of an amazing group called Slitherpuff. You can find us Slitherpuff MN. Slitherpuff MN on Facebook, and we also have an Instagram, right? Yeah, that's my Slytherin. That's my other puff. Also, I'm on the Leverage Redemption panel tomorrow, and then Marin has some panels, so I'll just be around and like
Good.
hanging
And
out.
Taylor, everybody go to the website, consoleroom.com.
Oh yeah, that might be easier.
Yeah, because Taylor is on a lot of things, and he doesn't even know where he's at. Like,
Although the next one at 4:30 on Saturday, which is today, I'll be at Female Leads in DC Movies. So talking about the awesomeness that is
Wonder Woman.
Princess of the Mascara, daughter of Hippolyta.
I will also be on that panel with Taylor at 4:30 as well, talking about female leads in DC movies. And if anybody wants to find me, you can go to my website. It's Miss Shannan, Shannan with an A.com. The links to all of my socials are there as well. So thank you very much for joining us, friends that are in the room. Thank you very much for joining us, friends that are at home. Enjoy the rest of your con, everybody. We
Thank
appreciate
you.